Hi all. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Algebra section 1.2 as we get on to the next thing. So in section 1.1, just a quick recap, we talked about a bunch of different kinds of functions. So we talked, if you remember the function machines, about what a function was, just doing some stuff with algebra, and then we were introduced to inverse variation and exponential growth functions. We made some tables and graphs with the hot tubs and the infection with the flu. And then we started describing a little bit some graphs of quadratic functions with the 113 Desmos activity. In section 1.2, which is coming up next, we're going to start with some square root functions. So that's just one more type of function that we're going to add to our little collection of introduced functions. You don't need to know them super well, but I want you to have seen them at least once. We're going to talk a little bit more about how we can use functions to generate inputs and outputs, and then in the last part of that we'll talk about what kind of things can be a function, thinking about the domain and range of functions. So what can go into a function, what can come out of a function, and what sorts of relationships between numbers do we actually get to call a function. So one more just sort of thing to go over. After we finished this checklist, which I'll call 1-2A, we'll take a little bit of a pretest. That'll be after the first two sections of 1-2-1 and 1-2-3. We'll just take a pretest. That'll be sort of a preview of what testing will be like, and it will count, but know that we'll be testing again over some of the same stuff in a couple of days. So I want you to see what it's like on the first day. It'll count if you do well, and if you don't, you'll get another try coming up soon. The things that we'll be talking about will be fluency between different functions. So I want to be able to give you a function and see you generate a table, a graph, maybe come up with a situation, or give you a situation, and then like we did in 1-1-2 with the hot tubs and the flu, come up with tables, graphs. Then we want to be able to describe a function, right? We've been spending a lot of time just describing what graphs of different functions look like, and I want to see what skills you have there. And then finally, just something we've been doing sort of on the side, and I'll incorporate into the starters for the next few days more, is solving linear equations. So that's just solving for a single variable, especially when we have to combine like terms on a single side before we solve. So coming up next, we have the next checklist here. Starting with the square root functions, like I said, functions and function notation, so inputs and outputs and how that looks, and then a quick recap before our test or our pretest, and then looking at 1-2-1. Just want to go over it really quick. We have that square root function. We're back on Desmos. You can just go to desmos.com and click on calculator. Again, trying to think about how we can describe the graph, right? Using words to just paint a picture for someone. What does this graph look like? And then trying to be specific too. How do these different quantities, x and y, how are they related? What happens to y when we do this to x? What happens to x when we do this to y? How is y growing? How is it getting bigger, smaller, whatever? And finally, we have another Desmos thing with sliders, just trying to study how these different equations work. And that's really just front-loading more study of functions that'll happen later in the semester. So, quick recap. Went through 1-1-1, looked pretty good. Going on 1-2-1, section 1.2, got more about functions, more about different kinds of functions, getting more specific and working on those equations. And we'll be starting our first round of assessments coming up soon. Thanks for watching. As always, let me know what I can do to make this better for you.